mental health, the Joker, Punisher, Moon Knight. Just some thoughts I've been having. The wife and I saw Joker, was it last Sunday? And just some forewarning, there will be spoilers in this. So if you have not seen the Joker movie, I highly recommend you do so. Prior to watching this, it was a pretty good movie. Highly recommend it. I'm a huge comic book nerd. Yeah, highly recommend it. Grab the wife and kids, run down to the cinema, quit your job real quick, run down there, buy a ticket, watch it, come back, resume the video in that order. Just to clarify on the mentality that I came in, that I have right now, that I came into when watching this movie. If you're unaware, these Wulff dropping videos are all my opinion. It may not necessarily have to do with heathenry. Obviously, there's a little bit of a spillover, some heathens, but so I'm a bit of a workhorse. And I don't mind putting in long hours, pushing myself, going that extra mile. That's how, in the span of 3 years, I went from minimum wage to running the branch of a company in this county, which of course didn't work out and I'm not doing anymore. I'll kind of go over that a little bit in this video too. I keep running into companies that like that level of work and expect that level of work, but don't reciprocate the effort. So again, to clarify the mentality, I am actually currently on 6 different payrolls. I am working 44 hours a week for one company doing armed security. I do 2 12-hour shifts and 2 10s. That's all for the cannabis industry. And then I also do a part-time job, in-house security for another cannabis company. And then I'm on call with 4 of those other companies, which I did a shift for last week, and I actually have another shift coming up right before another shift. So that's going to be pretty fun soon. So it gets tiring doing all that and still being broke. It sucks. So some of the themes in the movie kind of hit me right in the emotional spot. So I'm struggling up that ladder. I've made a couple of videos talking about that. But there's some of those themes in the Joker, as I'll kind of explain. I think we've all been there, and I think the current state of things, people are really feeling it, So the Joker, this 2019 movie, it was amazing. It was really a better way of doing a comic book movie, because rather than essentially creating a monster of the week, just like a Saturday morning cartoon would, this just expanded to an hour and a half, which is what most comic book movies do as their format. They actually made a film, like it would be a regular film, just like you might see a movie about a lawyer or a doctor or a regular person. They made a movie like any other movie, artistically done, very well thought out, very well shot, very well acted, but a regular movie that happened to have a character from comic books. And I'm really hoping that that's the way that these movies are going, because I'm a huge comic book fan, and I really hate seeing these Captain Marvel movies where it's hashtag girl boss and they're just placating to certain demographics, checking off those boxes, and not actually trying to create something of substance. Mind you, right now I have not actually seen the Captain Marvel movie, but I am pretty familiar with the current incarnation of Carol Danvers. Personally, I like the whole Rogue arc where she gets the powers, but hopefully Disney does that eventually. We'll see. So firstly, the movie had a lot of foreshadowing in it. You know how it's going to end up as the freaking Joker. Despite that consistent anticipation of, we know who he's going to be. We're very familiar with the Joker. We've seen multiple incarnations. With the name Arthur Fleck, which is kind of interesting, because in a lot of his origin stories, he's Jack Napier, which is the name they gave to the Jack Nicholson Joker. I want to say there's one incarnation in the comics where they actually did give him Arthur Fleck. Not sure though. Usually the movies influence the comics, so I'm sure we'll see more of that in the actual books. The entire time you're just kind of anticipating he's going to become the Joker, and despite that, it didn't necessarily subvert expectations, but it also subverted expectations. Like, there were things in it where you're like, what? And emotional roller coaster, and it did what good art should do, and that's make you think. Like, there's probably 100, if not more, videos on the movie just within the first week that it came out. I think as I'm filming this, it's been out for a week and a half, I'm pretty sure. And I'm just been watching videos on it. I mean, the opinions are interesting. I'm going to link a bunch of the videos below, including one by Thomas Sheridan that I totally agree with when he brought up the shadow. When I go into the archetypes, I'm going to talk about the shadow. I'm actually planning on using chess as a explanation of that, because it's got the dark pieces and the light pieces, and then each piece has a different individual role. I think just for a basic explanation of the archetypes, it's actually a pretty good analogy. So a good way to put that into heathen terms is Loki. Loki is a very shadow archetype. He's an archetype of subversion. He defies the norms, right? And the Rogan in general, very like that. The Native American coyote is pretty similar. It varies from tribe to tribe. And I don't remember specifics on that offhand, but I'm going to do a series on archetypes, and I'll explain each one and throw in a bunch of mythology and stuff corresponding to my analytical perspective of the archetypes. Is they're part of human psychology and come up in the various indigenous cultures around the world, and it's including art, which we see again in the Joker. We see that subversive archetype, right? So that's in a lot of ways, modern Loki, somebody that doesn't fit the cultural and social expectations and goes against that grain and self-actualizes and becomes the shadow aspect. To clarify, the shadow is, because all the archetypes are part of yourself, right? The gods are within us, and the shadow, the Loki, the Joker, if you will, is that subconscious part of you that's a lot of the repressed things. This is actually one of the reasons that you find people with a lot of broken home situations, really bad childhoods, traumatic events in their lives, tend to gravitate toward the shadow archetypes because they see themselves as somebody that doesn't necessarily fit in society. And I'm also going to go over in the archetype series how we find our archetypes and live out our archetypes. Supposedly, there's actually a quote from Carl Jung about needing to live your archetype. I have not found it. I've heard other people say it. Of course, nobody freaking cites it, which cite your sources. But if you have a source, cite it, please. I try to do that so that people can look stuff up, fact check me, do their own research. You see the shadow aspects will come out when people repress a lot of stuff and ignore the shadow. And that's what happens to Arthur Fleck, who becomes the Joker in the movie. He's very meek. He's dealing with these issues. He's taking care of his mother that has obvious mental health issues. Maybe more so obvious to me because I've actually done security and mental health and been inside of a mental health facility quite frequently. As well as transplanting patients. He's a very repressed figure, doesn't receive a lot of help. I believe it's set in 1981. I haven't looked it up or anything, but it looks to me like it's early 80s, late 70s. I would assume early 80s based on the age of Bruce Wayne in the movie. There's kind of a wide age disparity that they don't really define necessarily. They don't give his age. He looks pretty young. I want to say in the comics he's 8 when his parents die, but what they do at the end of the movie, but I'm not sure. And then Joaquin Phoenix is obviously a little bit older now. He was young in Signs, but if you don't remember him in Signs, he was the swing away guy.
Swing away, Meryl. Meryl. Swing away.
They used the baseball bat on the alien. That's a weird thing. Because Arthur is, repressing those negative thoughts and feelings when he's accosted for the second time in the movie. And he has the ability to defend himself. He does, and he realizes his power. And at that point, that's when the shadow emerges. There's this great scene that was actually apparently improvised by Joaquin Phoenix, and originally it was supposed to be a little bit different, but it's really great because it shows the emergence of the Joker when he's running away from the scene of his crime. And this is crime because he does follow the third person and finishes shooting him, and he kind of dances all weird and creepily, kind of a very interpretive dance, I guess you could call it. And that's really what the Joker is. Again, he's the expression of the shadow. Something I just kept thinking throughout the entire movie is, who hasn't been Arthur Fleck? We have all felt that way. Who hasn't felt kicked while they're down? Who hasn't felt like the low guy on the totem pole? Who hasn't felt ignored? Who hasn't felt like people would just walk past your dead body? I mean, he has a really great point in that speech that he gives. Yeah, a lot of people are focusing on the joke where he kills Murray, but I really like, you don't expect people to go werewolf and go wild.
Everybody is awful these days. It's enough to make anyone crazy.
Okay, so that's it. You're crazy. That's your defense for killing 3 young men?
No. They couldn't carry a tune to save their lives. Oh, why is everybody so upset about these guys? If it was me dying on the sidewalk, you'd walk right over me. I pass you every day and you don't notice me. But these guys, what, because Thomas Wayne cried about them on TV?
You have a problem with Thomas Wayne?
Yes, I do. Have you seen what it's like out there, Murray? Do you ever actually leave the studio? Everybody just yells and screams at each other. Nobody's civil anymore. Nobody thinks what it's like to be the other guy. You think men like Thomas Wayne ever think what it's like to be someone like me? To be somebody but themselves? They don't. They think that we'll just sit there and take it like good little boys, that we won't werewolf and go wild.
I really enjoyed that because, I mean, it's true. You can only take so much. The society that we currently live in, and I'm saying this in 2019 California, is not very pro mental health. And I don't even mean people with mental illness. I just mean people in general. Like, I mean, I'm obviously a functioning member of society, and it's hard to find a job. It's hard to be the sole provider for a family of 3. Hell, I mean, the fact that I plug my Patreon and Subscribestar at the end of these videos, I feel like shit about it. And it's really just because, I mean, this is something I would prefer to do as opposed to being beholden to a job that, I don't want to talk specifically about any one company, because it's not all the companies I work for sure. All 6 of them. You know, not everybody knows how to do security right. Not everybody listens to people with more security experience. I'll probably do a video at some point ranting about that specifically. I'm trying not to make this too much about my work, but the movie definitely pulled a few of those emotional strings. Like I said, who hasn't been Arthur Fleck? Who hasn't been down on their luck? Who hasn't been kicked while they're down? Maybe not physically, but metaphorically for sure. The scene where the 3 Wayne Corp guys, I think they're supposed to be like stockbrokers or something. Some generic rich guy job for plot. Because of course, Wayne Corp in the comic world does all of the things because, you know, it's, why wouldn't they? It's a business, and, you know, yeah, fancy. But yeah, when they're accosting Arthur Fleck because he can't stop laughing due to his mental health condition, which is actually more of a from one of the videos linked below. I can't remember his name. I'll try to throw it on the screen. He did like a diagnosis thing. Apparently that's kind of his thing. So I'm planning on watching a bunch of his videos. Kind of a dry dude, but it's analytical, you know, diagnostic. The sheer look of pain on Arthur Fleck's face as he's going down, as they've hit him. I mean, I hate that look on people's faces. I mean, I know that look. I've seen that look on people's faces, and I hate that look. It makes me feel for them. It makes me want to help them. So I'm great acting on Joaquin Phoenix's part, because that was amazing. And that was what really got me emotionally invested, was just being able to empathize with the main character, Arthur Fleck. Actually kind of reminded me the other day at work, one of my posts, I'm across the parking lot from a bar, and there was a transient who I remembered from when I did hospital security, and he was there earlier in the day and kind of looked like he was talking to himself. So one of the managers came and got me, and I just kind of stood outside and did the whole security scarecrow thing where you just kind of be a presence, you know, try not to maintain eye contact too much or anything aggressive. You're just letting them know you're there, and and they typically stay away. Like, I've never had anybody get agitated for me doing that, at least not to the point where they confronted me. So he comes back when it's dark, probably looking for a place to sleep. And he was limping, which was new. He wasn't limping before. When I worked at the hospital, which was like 2 years ago, I think, maybe a year and a half, I can't remember. Small-ish town, so you kind of see the same people over and over again. It's actually an interesting thing about security is you almost start keeping tabs on people's lives because you just see them in so many locations, so many different situations. So he went over to kind of the back-ish area of the bar. These two guys came out, and the one guy was like, "What are you doing here?" Just very aggressive. I don't know if he was like gonna assault this guy or anything like that, but I turn my flashlight on and make sure I start to approach. Of course, not leaving our side of the property, but letting them know, hey, there's somebody here. If you're gonna do something, it's not gonna be good. Because I'm not there to just protect the patrons. I'm not there just to protect the staff, and I'm not there making sure that the cars are not getting broken into. I'm doing all of that, and anybody that's around, because you have to treat everybody the same. You can't pick favorites. You can't be like, oh, well, this person's obviously transient, which, by the way, is never a for sure thing. Some people just dirty because they're working or something, right? Some people can just look that way. I don't understand it, but that's just me. Of course, I knew this individual, so what I ended up doing is walking with him off the property, and it turns out that the reason he was limping, and his eye was actually slightly drooped on the left side, and his speech was slurred. Apparently, he had a stroke. So this guy's living on the streets now, trying to find places to sleep, probably eat. He sort of looked like he was trying to get a ride earlier in the day when he had crossed the street. But I just kept thinking about that. Here's somebody down on their luck. I don't know his life story. Sometimes they tell you, sometimes they don't. They will usually give you a fake name, transients anyway. It's one thing to be like, hey man, you can't sleep here, or whatever. It's another thing to be like, hey, what are you doing here? And just approaching somebody super negative. I'm actually currently writing a book on security, and there's some stuff in there that I hate on. Who knows, maybe if this channel gets big, I'll also make a security channel. I've been kind of thinking about it. We'll see. Yeah, if there's one big takeaway from the Joker movie, it's one, we are all Arthur Fleck in some way, shape, or form. If you can't empathize with the main character, either something really right or something really wrong with you. Either you have the shiniest life ever and you've never had any pain, which probably means you're heavily protected and have never had any real challenges in life, or I don't know what to tell you, because who hasn't been down on their luck and kicked while they're down by society or the system or other people? And sometimes you're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Somebody's had a bad day and they don't know how to cope with those emotions. That's one of the reasons you get a lot of these people in society that do horrible things. They may not have a good support network. They keep running into shitty people. They might have ill perceptions of things, but that's typically based on a history. And like the doctor in the video, I'm not exactly sure what his position is. I think he's in mental health. One of the things he mentions that he didn't like about the movie, and he wasn't a big fan of the movie in general, the portrayal of mental health in such a negative way, because it is very popular in modern media to depict mental health as being violent. And in my experience, it can be. There's a reason that security guards are around during those times in those facilities and transport the patients. To a certain degree, we are a show of force. Obviously, I try to be too aggressive, and I think I've already ranted about that a little bit. One thing is, I'm really hoping that this is a direction for comic book movies, especially somebody that has been a fan since, pretty much as far back as I can remember. I remember being woken up by my mother as her abusive boyfriend at the time had left. He was a trucker, and he left, and I remember watching Nick at Night, watching the old George Reeves Superman.
Look, up in the sky, it's a bird. It's a plane. It's Superman. For truth, justice, and the American way.
I can never remember if it's George Reeve or George Reeves, or if it's Christopher Reeve or Christopher Reeves. One of them has the S and the other one doesn't, and it's weird they both played Superman. Nobody ever talks about that. odd coincidence. I don't think they're related, but if they were, that'd be pretty interesting. Yeah, I remember that, and watching the old Adam West Batman, and well, that was definitely a heavy influence on my childhood, because I had a pretty chaotic childhood. I've talked about it a little bit. I'm trying to overshare too much, but it was definitely something that came up when I was watching the movie. Again, you know, who hasn't been Arthur Fleck, right? But I'm hoping to see this direction in comic book movies. So the Punisher series on the Netflix had a lot of PTSD themes. One of the big things that I have learned through being around people with mental health issues and working in the system, and I've never had any formal training on mental health. I took a coaching class when I was in school for kinesiology, but mostly just kind of picked up knowledge from being around nurses and stuff, and you know, kind of watching people. So definitely no formal training. I really enjoyed that the Punisher hit on PTSD, and I think one of the big things is destigmatizing mental health, and you know, realizing everybody's got a little bit of something. You know, everybody feels depressed. You may not be clinically depressed, but everybody feels depressed. Clinical depression and situational depression are different. Actually, Eric Wordweaver has an interesting video on that. I'll put that in the description as well. He actually is in mental health, and I believe he's got an education background in it. I don't remember to what degree. I don't want to say, but you know, it's definitely something he encounters. So yeah, I'll throw that down there below. But he you know, talks about the distinguishing factors between clinical depression and situational depression. But you know, we're human beings. We're mostly id, honestly. Like, most of us are majority that emotional. I'm doing this because it feels good. I'm feeling things out. I'm very intuitive. It's very rare that somebody is mostly super ego. I think about why you buy the food you buy. Do you buy it because this has certain nutritional value and these are the exact calories I need? Or you're like, this tastes good, buy some chips, you know? Like I said, most of us are id and emotional beings. Like I talked about in the Quantum Fluffy Bunny video, emotions are one of the things that bind us together, which, like I said, is something in that video, is something that I learned when I lost my grandfather on the McGee side. Mine and my son's namesake. My dad actually has a different middle name. He's still Richard McGee, he's Richard Nelson McGee. It's kind of, which actually is his mother's maiden name. It's the Swedish side. The other thing that was really nice about the Punisher series is that it doesn't necessarily feel very superhero-y. I've only seen the first season. I think in the second season, the guy whose face he ruined, I think he calls himself Jigsaw, is like kind of super villainy in the second one. I'm not sure. Because again, I haven't seen it. And I'm not that familiar with the Punisher. From what I've seen, his like Jigsaw deformed face is really stupid though. It's like, you can still tell he's like a pretty boy actor. It's just like some lines across his face. It looks like something from the CW. So, hire real people, not pretty ones. Punisher is like, he's just kind of an action hero, right? That's you know, it's another trope that doesn't necessarily fall in line with crazy superpowers and everything. You could almost supplant Frank Castle with Charles Bronson, right? It's just really, it's another thing that's really nice to see about superhero films and series, in this case, being treated like actual movies and series and art rather than Monster of the Week like we have been getting in most of these things. Which brings me to my hope for the Moon Knight series.
And now, foul demon, face the vengeance of the Moon Knight.
Another series that's going to deal with mental health. Moon Knight, he has schizophrenia. He's got dissociative identity disorder, which used to be called multiple personality. And he, without giving away too much, former Marine turned mercenary. Some stuff happens in Egypt. He dies. The god Khonshu, the moon god, he gives him the ultimatum of, you can die or you can become my avatar in this world. He chooses Avatar, and he becomes the Fist of Khonshu. And then in the more recent comics, it kind of goes over some trauma that he dealt with, and apparently some of these personalities have been manifesting prior to that. Every writer seems to have a different take on, is Khonshu real? Is he like a god living in Mark Spector's head that because it's a god living in a human he can't fully take, so it turns into multiple personalities, or is he actually schizophrenic and Khonshu is like another hallucination and or personality? Kind of makes you think, is he actually experiencing this right now? Is this a delusion? I'm hoping that comes in the series. I'm hoping that they do that. Again, it should be a thinker. It should be something that gets those emotions evoked and gets us to think. And if you haven't realized by now, my hoodie that I wear in a lot of these videos is a Moon Knight hoodie. And the other interesting thing about that is the moon is the archetype of the mind, which again I'll go over more in depth in my archetype series. Mani in the Norse is very similar. There's not a whole lot about Mani, but there are certain similarities in Mani and Khonshu. So that's something else, is with different variations of these archetypes, we can kind of fill in the gaps, so to speak. Of course, everything's theory, and like any other theory, it should evolve over time, as I've said before in other videos. And Thunder Wizard explains it this way, which I really enjoy, that the sun is the soul and the moon is the mind, and the mind reflects the light of the soul. And you can't necessarily see the soul, but you can see the mind, as in perceive ourself and think with a mind, but you can't quantify the soul, and you can kind of quantify the mind. In fact, Mani, man, means mind. Khonshu and Mani are both very often depicted as young boys. Actually, most mythology that I've come across, at least, the moon is typically male, which is kind of interesting because the Wiccans paint the moon as female. Of course, like any other archetypes, that's very subjective, especially when it comes to something like a celestial body like that, right? A couple of interesting things that I noticed in Joker, to circle back around to that. There's a movie called The Network where this reporter has this long rant about the society and the systems, and because of his anger, he's about to get fired. He quits on camera, essentially, in this big long thing.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. It's a depression. Everybody's out of work or scared of losing their job. The dollar buys a nickel's worth. Banks are going bust. Shopkeepers keep a gun under the counter. Punks are running wild in the street, and there's nobody anywhere who seems to know what to do, and there's no end to it. We know the air is unfit to breathe, and our food is unfit to eat. We sit watching our TVs while some local newscaster tells us that today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. It's like everything everywhere is going crazy, so we don't go out anymore. We sit in the house, and slowly the world we're living in is getting smaller, and all we say is, please, at least leave us alone in our living rooms. Let me have my toaster and my TV and my steel-belted radios, and I won't say anything. Just leave us alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone. I want you to get mad. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to riot. I don't want you to write to your congressmen, because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. God damn it. My life has value. So, I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
And rather than being fired, they corporatize the rant and give him his own show where he's super angry and eventually gets killed for his anger. Rather than that being like a somber like reality check, they simply monetize it. Monetize all the things, right? Which is something you see again in society after the death of Murray, Robert De Niro's character. You kind of see that a little bit. I mean, it's interesting because, like Fight Club, for example, is very subversive of the norms in society and the expectations, primarily of men. I think it'd be applicable to all people, but that's different, male-centric in the movie and the book.
Like so many others, I had become a slave to the IKEA nesting instinct.
It's, again, corporatized, and the very things that the book speaks out against are profited on using the book, and it's the same with the network. In fact, there's even a Marxist organization in the network that is complaining about ratings, like they're anti-capitalist and they're trying to use capitalism. Like, it's a really interesting commentary. Another parallel that I thought was pretty interesting is Robert De Niro himself. He played the main guy in Taxi Driver.
Just get me out of here, all right?
Now, Robert De Niro creates a terrifying portrait of life on the edge of madness.
Tabby, just forget about this. It's nothing.
Taxi Driver, a film by Martin Scorsese.
Another former Marine who comes back to the States and not got everything going upstairs, and that ends up manifesting. Again, it's that repressed shadow coming out and acting out against society.
June 29th. I gotta get in shape now. Too much sitting has ruined my body. Too much abuse has gone on for too long. From now on, it'll be 50 push-ups each morning, 50 pull-ups. There'll be no more pills. There will be no more bad food. No more destroyers of my body. From now on, it'll be total organization. Every muscle must be tight.
I believe that movie led to the shooting of Ronald Reagan, pretty sure. But it was interesting that in The Joker, De Niro takes the opposite role of somebody that antagonizes the protagonist. Like, society at large is the antagonist in the movie, but De Niro is definitely a person that is a manifestation of that, as he makes fun of Arthur Fleck, and he's kind of almost like a father figure. Him and the mom watch him, and that's something they share. And while his mother is lying in the hospital after having a stroke, Arthur sees his embarrassing moment doing stand-up being made fun of by Murray, and then later on he gets a call like, hey, come on our show, obviously to poke fun at him.
And finally, in a world where everyone thinks they can do my job, check out this guy.
When I was a little boy and told people I was going to be a comedian, everyone laughed at me. Well, no one's laughing now.
You can say that again, pal.
Maybe in the modern day, the mental health thing would be a little bit more sensitive, and people would adhere to that a little bit better, because obviously now, compared to early 1980s, we have a healthier understanding of mental health. Of course, there's always room for improvement, and I thought that was interesting that De Niro would take on the opposite role. Also, there's a part where the young Bruce Wayne, it's in this like jungle gym or whatever, but slides down a pole. I was the only one that laughed in that theater. Obviously, that's a reference to the Adam West Batman, where him and Burt Ward, Robin, slid down the poles to become their, to put on their costumes. Nobody else got that reference. And nobody's mentioned it in any of the videos. I'm like, obvious as hell, right? So to summarize, mental health needs to be destigmatized. We need to see it in a better light. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen through government means. That's going to be more of a societal thing. Educate yourself, educate the people around you. Obviously, don't be obnoxious about it, but be the voice of reason and look stuff up. Like I'm going to talk about in the other video, and I talked a little bit about in the Quantum Bunnies video. We have to understand ourselves, and in order to do that, you got to look into what makes us tick. Mental health is a big thing with that. It's a soft science because it's so subjective, but the more we look into it and the more we want to study rather than persecute people that have mental health issues, the better off we're going to be in the long run, especially if we know how to prevent things. A lot of people, from my understanding anyway, a lot of people with a brain that has some of these preset things like schizophrenia or bipolar or whatever, a lot of these things that are mental health issues that are kind of waiting to happen get aggrandized by traumas in life. It's not necessarily what happens, but from what I remember from working in a mental health facility as a security guard and being around a lot of people with mental health issues, which I believe is a large portion of our homeless population. I mean, sadly, because they don't have a lot of resources, it gets exacerbated because of their lifestyle, which is another thing. Those traumas turn what could be a functional person into somebody with severe mental health issues. And they may not necessarily be violent, but it will be something that impedes their success in life or their ability to function, from what I've seen, like I said. Which also leads me into funding for mental health issues and mental health facilities. As a guard, I have had to do a one-on-one with multiple patients, which is, they've either been violent, maybe a history of sexual abuse, whatever, and I have had to shadow them. And there have been entire days where it's literally just me following this person, walking around in circles over and over again, because they have nothing to do. I mean, you already have mental health issues. They've obviously exhibited some kind of criminal behavior, because I'm having to watch them for some reason, and they are stuck in their head all day, and it's literally because the county doesn't have enough funding. Like, I'm not going to say the facility. If you're local, you're going to know what it is, because again, it's not that big and you really don't have that much of it. It's sad. But we're not able to fund like just an activities person, because that requires a bachelor's degree, and we can't pay somebody that has that high level of education enough to sustain that position, which is really sad. I mean, if you have the patience and have the ability to, mental health needs good people, whether that's social workers, nurses. One of the nurses showed me, this kind of as an incentive, one of the nurses showed me what his company makes, not necessarily what he made, but the company that hired him out, because he was a traveler, made like $46 an hour for every hour that he worked. And I asked him, I was like, well, you make more than that, right? And he's like, oh, yeah. He was kind of complaining about how much they make compared to what he makes or something. So if he's making close to $50 an hour, I mean, that's a heck of an incentive to become a nurse in the mental health field. I mean, like I said, if you're the patients, and then even with like a security background, you can actually become a mental health worker. From what I've seen, kind of does more of the day-to-day grind stuff with the patients. I've actually had, from the last company that I worked for, at least 2 security guards go into that field. Actually, no, 3, when I think about it. I know of 4, though. There's one that didn't work for the company that I used to work for. Or I used to manage for, even though I'm still here. Again, educate yourself. Learn as much as you can. There's tons of YouTube videos on it. If you can get formal education, all the better. Not all of us have that time. The better we understand something, and the better we understand somebody else's issues, the more likely we are to be a better functional society and promote better mental health. I'm not saying we're gonna create jokers or anything. I mean, there's a reason that homelessness is so high right now. There's a reason that depression is so high right now. There's a reason that there's a lot of issues going on in what should be a very prosperous country or countries. I'm not too familiar with anything outside of the US, but Russell Brand, who actually did a video on the Joker, again, I'll put it down below, has a lot of very interesting things to say about mental health, because he's actually had issues with mental health and addiction. I don't always agree with him. He's a little more lefty than I am, but it's still pretty interesting. Actually, if you get him and Joe Rogan in the same room, it's pretty funny. I'll put the Joe Rogan podcast link down there. It's a YouTube video, but I'll put it down there. There's actually a couple of them, but I'll put one down there because it's pretty funny, because they're both on a certain vibe. But yeah, he's got some pretty interesting things to say about mental health, and he's in England, the land of the Ings, the Angles. So it seems to me that this is going on in multiple industrialized countries that should have pretty decent health care and should have decent mental health systems, but for some reason don't. And I don't know exactly what it is, but my guess is the stigmatization of mental health and or abnormalities in the brain in general. Even autism should be understood better, because there's certain things that if somebody has autism, they have to go through in the day-to-day that we that don't have autism should understand in order to be like, okay, well, when this person needs to stim, or just like where they try to calm down, they might fiddle with something or have to rock or whatever, or if they have like a meltdown, what we should do when we're around that. I mean, definitely if you're in a field like security, you should know. Like I've had, when I was at the hospital, actually an autistic child came in. Luckily the mom was there and knew what to do, but like Had there been like an autistic person that had an issue at that time, I would have not known what to do. Not saying I would really know what to do now, but I know a little bit better because I've tried to take some of the time on the YouTubes to better educate myself, as we all should. I'm a firm believer in individuality and independence, but we do live in a society, we are pack animals. Human beings are very interesting in that we're not necessarily solitary, we're not necessarily a collective, we're actually kind of in between. In order to function in that collective, we need to better understand certain things. Really, it's just to function better. Like I know if, let's say tomorrow I got hurt at work, it's a possibility that somebody's just going to see the uniform and flip out. I've had people fixate on the uniform before, and so you never know what's going to set somebody off. So I could be accosted tomorrow and all of a sudden traumatic brain injury and life is much harder because I've got some uncontrollable thing. In fact, the laugh in the Joker movie is most likely due to head trauma. I mean, living with something like that would be horrible, but we should try to understand that, and the world would just be a better place if we gave people the benefit of the doubt.
Everybody just yells and screams at each other. Nobody's civil anymore. Nobody thinks what it's like to be the other guy.
Obviously, if there's a violent situation, 100% defend yourself until the threat stops. I don't know of a single state that isn't okay with make sure that you are okay until the assailant is no longer attacking you. Stop. Don't be the person that keeps wailing on them, because at that point, you're at fault. And this isn't legal advice, this is just what I know from the training that I have had. Is once the threat stops, you're done. Back away. By all means, protect yourself. Non-aggression principle, right? It's a huge thing in libertarian. It's defense, not offense. I've tried to explain that to some Antifa sympathizers. Unless somebody's attacking me, I'm not going to be aggressive. I'm never going to be the person to initiate a conflict. I try to be extra polite in society so that people don't perceive me as aggressive, because you never know how somebody's going to perceive you. Educate yourself and know how to interact around people. One bit of advice I can give is if somebody's schizophrenic, don't surprise them, first off, and don't stand too close. I've actually had a mental health worker at the facility get assaulted by a very large man. Luckily, the mental health worker was also a big dude, but he was just standing next to the bathroom door, because that's why we were over there. There was no barrier between the bathroom, and the individual came out, and just because he was standing too close to him, he perceived that as a threat. Like something I always teach my guards is make sure when you're approaching somebody, they can see you. Like I will try to go in front of people, make sure they can see me, they see who I am. And that's what I do when I initiate. Because if somebody's schizophrenic, their reality is not our own, right? And schizophrenia is kind of a wide blanket thing from what I understand. But they might perceive you walking up as a threat, especially if they're transient, because they're kind of always on the defensive. I mean, around here, they're constantly getting their things stolen. I mean, this is the reason they have dogs a lot of the time. They might have weapons on them. I've woken people up that have had giant freaking knives just next to them. Threw the knife away first, then woke the guy up. He was not going to wake up with a giant knife next to him to stab me. But yeah, you never know what is going to set somebody off. So, always be calm, always approach very calm. I mean, I guess this is more like security related, but I mean, a lot of us in our jobs interact with the public. Actually, I'm going to throw a link to a really good channel, Free Field Training. He's a law enforcement. I want to say he's in Wisconsin. He also does security. Here in California, you can't do that. It's illegal. But apparently in his state, which I believe is Wisconsin, it's okay. And he actually started out in security. So he's actually got a lot of really good advice for security and law enforcement. But as you can kind of tell from my rant, which is, before I'm editing it, at this point is an hour and 7 minutes. So, yay future self, you're going to edit a crap ton of stuff. Anyway, hopefully I can narrow it down so you guys aren't super bored by me ranting. But some of this stuff is just applicable for regular people, for regular folks, especially if you interact with the public. And of course, a very big take from the Joker movie was, if you don't accept the shadow, if you don't work through those shadow aspects, it will consume you and you will become the shadow. And something else is, You are worthy. I made a video called Are You Worthy, which I'll put a link below, where I talk about that, and I talk about kind of the struggle I went through a little bit with my worth. If you are bettering yourself and taking the extra steps, taking the steps to become a better person, you have value, you have worth, you set your standard of worth. As I talked about, and I think it was my first Wulff droppings, do not accept mediocrity in your life. Always be attaining that next level. That might be a career change, that might be a move, that might be promotion where you're at, that might be changing or helping to change the job you're in to make it better. You set your own worth and value. Be better tomorrow than you were yesterday. Are the sum of our actions. Skull.